talk about the subconscious brain where our whole life is being recorded. We are basically programmed on our experiences. So what happens is that our senses from smell, taste, touch, and all of these experiences that happen, they get recorded into memory because so many things in our life are not stored as memory. Something that's very traumatic, memory that's useful, a surprising event, something special, and something very interesting, something that's very impactful, something that had very high senses will get stored as a memory. How much memory and how many events, we don't know. There's a scientist, George Miller, that looked at how much memory or how much chunking of memory we can handle at right now moments. That has been debated. Some people say 5, some people say 7. And what is going on is that you're having events that are auditory and visual spatial events that could only be stored at a certain time in your brain for a given moment. That's your working memory. And if that memory is traumatic or meaningful or useful, then we'll take that memory and we'll prioritize it. And those other memories that are in the background start fading and fading and fading. If it's just a non-useful memory, then it just goes away. That just shows you how much of our brain can pay attention to, how much we can store as memory. So working memory is the memory that's acting right now. So in neurology, we see working memory in a lot of cognitive disorders. We also see it in attention deficit disorder, where when you ask somebody who has attention deficit disorder to memorize a certain amount of items, it's very difficult. Or if you tell them to memorize an item and there's some distraction and then they go back, they'll forget that item. And that looks like memory loss, but it's not memory loss. It's just the working memory deficiency is causing some element of symptoms as memory loss. Every experience that comes across in your brain can be stored as an emotion. So when we get into this anxiety state, that's an emotional state, what it does, it produces a feeling. And the feeling usually is felt in your body. When we're in a state of mind and our mood is in an altered state of mind, then our ability to concentrate gets affected. If you have trouble concentrating, then you have difficulty incorporating working memory. So a lot of my patients say they have brain fog or they have memory loss. And in fact, it's more of a concentrational issue because they're not able to concentrate because their mind is on that default mode network, which is ruminating and thinking about the past and the future. When you look at someone who's maybe in a depressed state of mind or overwhelmed state of mind, they're not here. They're not present. They're in that default mode network. That's why when you look at the default mode network, those structures light up in anxiety and depression. So that's why when you meditate and become more mindful and present, then it deactivates that default mode network and you become more present and you're able to concentrate on what's happening now. The key is if you concentrate and you're attentive and you're conscious, then that opens up the brain into storing memory. Our brains are filled of images, and those images also are stored with all of our senses into a wired, patterned behavior. And when I talk about behaviors that are downloaded, I'm talking about patterns. And these patterns through habits, and the habits are the way we've reacted to those anxiety feelings and sensations or those memory events. And patients don't understand that you have the amygdala that triggers that sympathetic nervous system. But worry itself is so powerful that it can trigger a lot of rumination and a lot of anxiety. Out of the thousands to millions of thoughts and worries, almost all of them don't come true. But your brain is causing that as a protective mechanism of thinking and planning of all the ways you can be safe. You've got to be consciously aware of these patterns and behaviors. So that's why it's really important to focus on the subconscious brain, because under the level of consciousness, all these patterns and behaviors are stored. And they're stored since you were little. A lot of people, as you know, you can see they act just like mom and dad, act just like their grandparents, and so and so and so and so, because they're products usually of their patterns based on downloaded patterns and behaviors. The subconscious loves familiarity. People end up with the same boyfriends that are like their parents. They end up making choices like their parents. They decide to do things like their parents. And even though it's the wrong decision, most likely, they feel comfortable in that. Even though it's uncomfortable choice, it's a comfortable feeling. So they gravitate towards the same type of patterns because the brain resists change. But that's the thing, is when you're stuck in a belief pattern due to repetitive behaviors and thoughts, you can just walk around doing the same thing, dating the same people, eating the same foods that are bad for you. It's just constant patterns and behaviors that we do and we tell ourselves because we're comfortable with it. Hey, let's not work out today. You had a long day. Let's eat a cookie today. Let's reward ourselves because you know what? Your boss was tough on you. Those are things that are going back to those patterns and behaviors where you make the same decisions. You end up rewarding yourself the same way because it makes you feel good, it makes you feel comfortable. The habits are performed under the level of consciousness. You can't change a habit consciously because it's deep ingrained into your brain. The brain resists change, meaning the subconscious, is that the change requires a lot of effort, requires a lot of energy. What you need to do is, over time, is with habitual, repetitive changes, you want to reinforce different patterns and behaviors, but you have to be consciously aware because your brain is not good at looking at things. Those things that are in front of you, that is in your face, if you're consciously not aware, you can bypass it. So if you plug that into your subconscious, your brain is going to look for it. You are going to pay attention to it because your subconscious has stored it and will bring it down to consciousness. Becoming consciously aware of that habit, taking that habit and change it into another type of habit that's rewarding, that will not lead to negative consequences, and with repetition and repetition and repetition. So one of the things that it's important is putting the work into change. The brain resists change. It does. It likes familiarity. When I walk into a room and I talk to a patient, the patient's looking at me, and a lot of my patients start saying, what are you going to prescribe for me? How are you going to help me? Doctor, what do I need to do to get better? What do I need to change? What do I need to do? Because when I'm talking to a patient, they're looking at me with all the power. No, I can give you advice, and I can give you all of these things I'm going to tell you. And I'm going to give you a lot of good advice, and I'm going to give you things that will help your habit. You need to accept and take a look at these habitual behaviors and make that change and put the work into it. The work itself is rewarding. And you'll see that your health will start resulting in a positive direction based on positivity, based on behavioral change, based on changing your beliefs and your perspective. These are all things to start off with in order to change and feel better. When I look at a history and the patients fill out the paperwork, they already put depression, anxiety disorder into their diagnosis, and they label themselves as, I have depression, I have generalized anxiety disorder, I am a diabetic, I have this, I have that. And in order to change a habit, which is spoken well in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is to change your identity. What do you mean by changing your identity? Well, if you become a diabetic, you act like a diabetic. Your subconscious accepts it and looks at these things with the imagery that I'm a diabetic. The subconscious learns by repetition. Repetition is habitual. The more you repeat something or you ruminate about something, the thought becomes activated so easily, and it becomes part of your thoughts. So they're not random thoughts.